And we're back for part two of the Top Shelf Dynasty League. It's a 12-team dynasty. We're ready for number 6 here, working our way all the way up through number 1. Boy, you were right, Chris. Top half of the show, we had a lot of parity. And I'm looking for something to take off here, and I just haven't seen it yet. I'm hoping the top half of this league here has something that's head and shoulders above the rest of the league so we could really feel confident about this. But it looks very, very close so far. So, Chris, let's start with number 6. We've got Jim Beam Me Up Scotchy as our number 6 team here. We've got Kyler Murray, Dalvin Cook, A.J. Dillon, Devontae Adams, Garrett Wilson, Debo, Darren Waller, Cortland Sutton, Evan Ingram, C.J. Stroud at Superflex. We've got Tannehill sitting here on the bench. Jerome Ford, Chris, I've been saying this for 2 years now. Keep an eye on that name. I still stand by that more this year than ever. Melvin Gordon, is his career over, Chris?
Sounds like it's over. So pour one out for our guy Melvin Gordon. He was a value in 8 straight drafts or however long he's been in the league. But pour one out for our guy.
Listen, I still think he's a value at undrafted free agent here in the drafts that we've got going on now. What else do we have here, Chris, that's worth a mention? Absolutely nothing. Picks are intact going forward. So what you see is what you get with this team here, Chris. It's definitely a step forward talent-wise, but oh boy, it's very thin, and we've got a question mark or two here on the back end.
Yeah, it is kind of thin, but I think the talent is there throughout. There's just the one major question mark for me is CJ Stroud, right? Is he going to be something right away? And again, this is, with this team, if you remember our Lamar Jackson guy was down there at the bottom. CJ Stroud in a first for Lamar Jackson is that in the ballpark considering both teams? Is that way off? I mean, does either team do it or does neither team do it?
Uh,
I That's all I got here for this team is that deal.
I was wondering what you were going to say, Chris, and you're shockingly closer than I thought you were going to be. I think if I'm the Lamar Jackson guy, oh man, that's actually pretty good, Chris. I think that's an offer that I think both sides have to take a look at. I think it might be a touch light for Lamar Jackson because CJ Stroud's still not going in the top 25 picks of the draft. From what we've seen so far, it's been a couple weeks since we've done a draft. Maybe that's changed a little bit, but I think that's going to be a little bit light for Lamar Jackson.
I do too, but given the context of the Lamar Jackson owners team and the context of what we've seen so far in the league, I'm having a hard time coming up with a better deal to offload Lamar Jackson, right? Nobody really has a ton of depth. Nobody has extra picks. And you're looking at the young quarterback owners, and this really is the only one who I think has major playoff aspirations. So it could be one of those things where maybe something small gets added in, but I think the framework could potentially be there. Now, as for the rest of this team, again, I think it's pretty solid here with Kyler and maybe, even if Stroud is your QB2, I think he's going to be, perfectly serviceable. You've got Tannehill as well to give you that bridge if you need, for the first month of the season while Stroud finds his footing. Cortland Sutton, I think, is being a bit overlooked here in Denver. I think he's going to be fine. I think he could make some big plays if they, open that offense up a little bit with Sean Payton there, comboing with Russell Wilson. So I think top to bottom, I think this team looks solid. We'll see what happens with Dalvin Cook. He remains on the Vikings, and as long as he's there, I think he's going to be productive. So I like this team, Matt. I think 6, 7, 8, maybe 6, 7, 8, 9 are all pretty similar here, and that they usually look like they're missing one or two pieces to really take off. But I think with the deal, this team could find itself jumping up a few ranks.
Yeah, Chris, I've talked myself into that Lamar Jackson deal for this team. You gotta, do what you got to do to get it done. I looked through a couple times though. not a whole lot to add to that deal. I think the best thing you can offer is a second. I don't want to get into the business of dealing away any of these starters to get it done. So I think it's close. I don't know if the second pushes it over the top, but I think you're right, Chris. The framework is there for a deal. On Cortland Sutton, Chris, we're not big Sutton guys. I don't think we own a single share, which I think is kind of a shock because we're pretty big value guys. And the way he's dropped in these drafts, I don't necessarily understand it, but we just haven't gotten our hands on one yet. I feel like that's going to change here in our next couple of startups that we do in the next month.
Yeah, I agree. He just seems to be dropping like a stone, and the draft just hasn't fallen to us in ways where we could take advantage of that. But I think he's in line for some targets here. I think he's going to be okay, and especially if he's in your last one or two flex spots, I think that's perfectly serviceable, and I think it's even potentially gives you game breaking upside. If he has one of those weeks where he catches two long touchdowns or even a long touchdown, you take that every day out of your last flex spot.
Chris, I'm trying to think of a way that I could get off of Devontae Adams and just get a younger wide receiver that's very similar. I think it's a little bit off to try to get after like a Waddle with Devontae Adams. And the problem is you're not going to be able to get much of a younger wide receiver. I wonder if, we still haven't seen Chris Olave. I wonder if you could give Devontae Adams up to one of these top teams and get Olave plus back. I think that fits this team a little bit better. And I think it kind of lengthens our window a little bit. And we may not end up losing that much production depending on how things go with Olave this year.
Yeah, man. The problem is Olave is going he's going higher than Devontae Adams right now in drafts.
Is he
Uh,
really?
oh yeah. I just pulled up the ADP actually to check it out. Non-super flex here. Olave is going actually in the top 12. He's going 11 overall in terms of position players, and Devontae Adams is going 29 overall in terms of position players. So, if you're looking for younger players to drop down and get a piece in addition, you're talking about Christian Watson. You're talking about you could maybe buy a couple years back with Terry McLaurin or a Brandon Ayuk. I mean, that's that's kind of on the table. And then you want some significant pieces back. If you're going to do a 2-for-1 down to Watson or McLaurin or Ayuk.
That's disgusting. Miss me with all that. Devontae Adams will stay on my team. Hold on. When you say Olave, 11th position player or 11th wide receiver?
11th position player overall.
My
He is
goodness.
all right. So it's hot off the presses here. You've got Jalen Waddle at 9, Brees Hall at 10, Olave at 11, Amon Ra at 12, Saquon Barkley at 13, Gibbs at 14. Now, obviously, that doesn't include any quarterbacks. So,
Well, I guess that explains why we've added 0 Olaves to our portfolio this offseason. Yeah, I think every time I see Garrett Wilson go as early as he does and Olave go as early as he does, I don't find myself missing it at all. And I'm kind of happy to see it go as well. So, I think you're right here with what we've said about this team here, Chris. I think the upside is there. But boy, man, the lack of depth just really, really scares me for what this team could be capable of if he sees some injuries. But, it's still young enough where he could pivot depending on what happens in his season. So, Chris, let's get to our next team here, Chris. At number 5, we got Ron Burgundy's Drink. Ron Burgundy's Drink at 5. We got Aaron Rodgers, Derrick Henry, Joe Mixon, CeeDee Lamb, Ty Hill, DK Metcalf, Freiermuth, Hopkins, Jahan Dotson, and Geno Smith at Superflex. We've got Kenny Pickett sitting here on the bench. Let's see. We've got not a whole lot else here, Chris. Antonio Gibson, Samaje Perine, Zeke Elliott, Devin Singletary is an interesting play, I think, this year. We've got Mayer down here at tight end. Khalil Shakir is a guy that I like as well at his ADP. Troutman, Darnell Washington as well. No first or second. So we finally got a first or second on the move here, Chris. So we may see a little bit less flexibility with this team. But I was saying, I think we've taken a pretty big step forward. I like this team, Chris. Good mix.
Yeah, I think it's a team that's going to score a lot of points. I think he's going to be scary to play week in, week out. My concern here is honestly it's with the quarterbacks yet again. I mean, I think Rodgers and Gino probably going to be fine. But would anyone be surprised if Rodgers, goes on sabbatical and Geno Smith just has a severe regression type season from his last year? I would not be surprised at all. I think they're going to be fine. I think they're going to be productive. They're not going to give you top end, I don't think. And I think that's what kind of pushes his team down, towards the middle of the pack at 5. All that said, really good potential to be really good and score a ton of points with Henry and Mixon and Lamb and Hill and DK. I mean, there's a lot here. It's fairly thin though. We hope Samaje Perine and Antonio Gibson gives them something. We don't, we've got Alan Lazard as well, but it's fairly thin. All things considered, we're just kind of hoping some of our bench guys hit for him, but the top end solid, with Ty Hill and CeeDee Lamb. I think that gives you all the ceiling you need. But just a few question marks here and there.
Yeah, Chris, the window's closing on this team rather quickly. You've got them ranked at fifth. I think that's probably fair. We haven't seen the top four yet, but I think it's better than everything that we've seen so far. But man, with Rodgers, Derrick Henry, Joe Mixon, DeAndre Hopkins, looking at what their career trajectory is at this moment, it's not looking good like we've got another 1 or 2 years after this. So this is going to be a team here, Chris, that I think we kind of stand pat with. But man, if we're sitting at 4-4 and the writing's on the wall, the injuries banged us up a little bit, I think we've got to hit the panic sell button and move on from the likes of Tyreek Hill, Joe Mixon, and Aaron Rodgers, Geno Smith for really whatever we can get, and really start the rebuild. I think this team's going to be okay as long as it can sustain whatever injuries comes its way. But man, this is going to be a dangerous situation where I think if we wait too long to rebuild, we're going to be in a little bit of trouble. I'm interested to see what 4 teams you have ahead of this team.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all of that. Right, have that pivot in mind if you need to. I think they're stuck trying to compete though, because gave up his first and his second next year. So I'd kind of go all out to win this year, without giving up any more future picks. But have that pivot button in mind if you do start out slow and the injuries start mounting. There's plenty of guys with value on this team. I mean, up and down the lineup, there's trade value on this team.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a fun team, Chris. Should score a lot of points. There's a lot of sex appeal on this team in terms of the guys that could score a ton of points in a variety of ways. Derrick Henry, Joe Mixon, not a lot of love for either of these guys in the offseason. Would love for both of those guys to shine through because I think this team, will obviously benefit from them, being the top quality plays that they are. All right, let's get to our number 4 team here, Chris. We've got Grand Old Dad at number 4. We've got Grand Old Dad, Old Granddad here. Old Granddad at number 4. And we've got Josh Allen, Alvin Kamara, Aaron Jones, Steph Diggs, A.J. Brown, Mike Evans, Kyle Pitts, Ron Dillmore, Khalil Herbert, and Derek Carr as our starters at the moment. We've got Leonard Fournette sitting here on the bench. We've got Eli Mitchell, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. We'll see what happens with him, man. I'd love to see him get out of, chief jail that he's currently in right now. I'd love to see what he has. Robert Woods as well. Nothing really past that. Irv Smith, Juwan Johnson, 2 tight ends I'm loving in the back end of these drafts as well. Picks are intact going forward. Chris, I started off with some of these names and saying, wow, we are taking a monster step forward again. But boy, we hit the skids pretty quickly when I said Rondale Moore and Khalil Herbert and really didn't spit out a whole lot of quality depth either. So this is maybe a little bit of a scrubs and duds, or what do we call it here, Chris? Studs and scrubs approach.
Yeah, stars and scrubs. You almost got it there on your 4th try. Yeah, but listen, I love the top end talent. Again, yeah, you said it though. If these last 2 flex spots were just incrementally better. I think we're looking at probably a top two team potentially. But they're not. So here he is at four. But again, the top is going to carry him, right? Josh Allen, Kamara. We'll see what Aaron Jones does this year. I think Green Bay goes a little more run heavy this season, and Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon kind of both get theirs. Steph Diggs, obviously, I mean that's a heck of a stack to have. The Allen Diggs stack. You love AJ Brown scoring a ton of points again. Mike Evans going to absolutely bust out again this year with Baker Mayfield YOLOing balls to him all season. Gotta love that. Kyle Pitts, we'll see what happens to him. But I think it's going to carry him. And I think this team, lock him into a playoff spot for me. I think he's going to figure out a way to make it work with these last two flex spots, whoever they may be. I'm gonna go out. I'm gonna go out and try and buy somebody, Matt, with my first and my second if I can. I'm gonna go buy production. I'm not gonna do it now unless the right deal comes along, but I'm gonna buy productive vets if I can and make a run at this thing. I mean, why waste another year of the Josh Allen Diggs stack when we can, shore things up and just really go for it. That's my move with this team. I'm gonna go ahead and try and win as much as I can by upgrading those last two flex spots and using the picks I have to do it.
Yeah, yeah, I'm with you. I think that's the correct direction that this team has to go. But, Alvin Kamara and Aaron Jones scare me a little bit. And those being really the only two running backs worth anything, I think I'm going to play this a little bit cautious. I'm not going to go out and make those plays right now. In fact, I may even wait to see into week 4, week 5 of the season, Chris, to see what I really do have, right? Let's see Mike Evans really isn't that compatible with Baker Mayfield or God forbid Kyle Trask this year. Aaron Jones starts giving up a little bit to AJ Dillon. Alvin Kamara's in prison. Let's see what happens with those guys before we start selling the farm because, man, this could get ugly very quickly if we make those moves right now and suddenly things really don't break our way. We're already light at depth. We've just given up our only pieces that can bring something back. So while I think that's probably going to be the likely play, what you mentioned, I'm not in any hurry to do it.
Matt, do you think you could get Rashad White for a second right now?
Oh, no, you can't, but I don't even want Rashad White on this team. I mean, what is Rashad White giving us?
I mean, he's a reasonable production in the flex spot, gives you a third running back. I mean, that's a cheap deal. If you could, that's the thing I'm looking for here, right? I want to use my first and second to get me two players, and if the second gets me Rashad White, or I mean, who else is in that range? I mean, I like Miles Sanders a whole lot better, but I think you're probably talking about 2 seconds. I paid 2 seconds for Miles Sanders before going after a shot of White, I think. Although Sanders goes near lower than Rashad White anyway. So, I mean, maybe not anymore, but I think I'd try and pay for Miles Sanders or Nick Chubb or Dalvin Cook, somebody along those lines where I don't have to give up a first for, and then use my first to try and get somebody of a little better quality. And all of a sudden, I've got two upgrades in my last two flex spots. I push Moore and Herbert to the bench, giving me some actual depth, and now I'm on my way.
Boy, if somebody came to me offering me a second for my Nick Chubb, I would berate them until they quit fantasy football. Same thing with Miles Sanders. You're not getting hit them for a second.
Matt, just because you like them doesn't mean everybody likes them.
I don't even like Nick Chubb.
I'm just telling you what the value is. No, are you ever getting a first for Nick Chubb anymore? He is
You ha-
not. He
you
is
have
not
to.
commanding a first.
Oh my God. If he's going for less than a first, I will make offers in all 50 of our leagues tonight until we have 100% ownership of Nick Chubb.
Oh, well, how about Dalvin Cook then? You're not getting a first for Dalvin Cook. You're
I
not
don't
getting
want
a
any
first.
part of Dalvin Cook
You're
right
not
now.
getting a first for Miles Sanders. I'm just saying, forget the names. There's guys in this range that you can get that don't cost you a first, and that's what I'm suggesting here.
All right, fair enough. I'll forget the names there, but don't you dare put Nick Chubb and a second in the same sentence
Oh
ever
my
again.
goodness.
All right, Chris, let's get to our number 3 team. We've got cold beer here, cold beer here. Sitting at number 3, we've got Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley, Tony Pollard, Devontae Smith, McLaurin, Michael Thomas, David Njoku, Gabe Davis, and Darnell Mooney. We've got Justin Herbert at our super flex spot. Guys on the bench worth a mention. Geez, Chris, it's kind of the same old story, man. You said it perfectly at the top of the show. It's kind of the same story with a lot of these guys. Paris Campbell here with the Giants, McCole Hardman now with the Jets, Rashid Shaheed with New Orleans, KJ Osborne maybe worth a mention, Dalton Kincaid, Peyton Hendershot, Zach Ertz, who I still love. All right, this guy's got that extra first, right? I think we already talked about a first being vacated earlier in the show. But man, Chris, I was loving talking about this team. And then we start with Gabe Davis and Darnell Mooney, two guys I couldn't be further off. But man, these two quarterbacks here are really going to get things fired up. So I like this team here, Chris. I think 3 is a good ranking.
Yeah, it's very similar across the entire league where everyone seems to kind of have that fatal flaw on their roster. And this team, it's again just like the last team, these two flex spots. Possibly even Michael Thomas could be an issue as well. But this team's got two firsts to work with and a second. If we're advocating the prior team to buy, this team to me is a no-brainer buy as well. I'd be using those two firsts to get what I can for upgrades in those flex spots. I mean, I'd give up 2 seconds if I can for, we haven't seen him yet, but Keenan Allen, that kind of thing. Again, you're going to tell me, you're going to tell somebody to shove off. They offer you 2 seconds for Keenan Allen, but listen, nobody likes him. I'm sorry to break that news to you. Again, this is another team I want to buy because I've got the top end talent in Hurts and Herbert, Saquon and Tony Pollard. Barkley and Pollard, I mean, are probably only going to give you one or two more elite years. So we got to capitalize with this team and we've got to buy.
Yeah, you're right. We absolutely have to, Chris. We've got those two first to be able to do so. Man, I hate to see Gabe Davis and Darnell Mooney in a starting lineup here. And really, there's nobody else on this bench who I would feel comfortable throwing in there. Maybe a Dalton Kincaid and a Zach Ertz. But man, I think you said it right. I think we've got to go after it here. Even Michael Thomas, I don't think is any type of sure thing here to be that valuable as well. So yeah, Chris, let's throw a first at one player, a second first at another player. This is a team, especially built around these quarterbacks. These are two guys that are not losing value anytime soon. Let's push our chips to the middle with this team here, Chris. I think once the moves are made, we could probably be looking at this team as the best team with just a couple of moves. Would you say that's accurate?
I think that's reasonable, depending on who he gets with those one or two moves. I think that's reasonable because the top end talent is there, the running backs are there. It's really all for the taking here, and I think he could make something work. And if he does get the top end players now, I think one thing I'd be cautious of, and I was just kind of scrolling through the lower ranked teams here. There's a team with Cooper Cup, right? Cooper Cup, I don't think you can get him for one first. Does he still cost two first? Can you get him for a first and a second kind of thing? I would caution on giving up both those firsts for one singular player like a Cooper Cup. I wouldn't do that. I would aim a little bit lower if that's the price on Cup. I think you get him for less though. Just depending. But that would be the one mistake I think I could see this team making, and I caution him against it, is giving up both those first for one single player. He needs 2 to 3 players on his team to really kind of give himself the best chance at a title.
Yeah, that's absolutely sound advice. And Cooper Cup is probably costing 2 firsts at this point. I'm not paying that, but if I have Cup, I'm not accepting anything less than that. He's still going as a top 30 pick or so in these startup drafts, but I think he suddenly has a floor that is limitless, and that's going to stare me and kind of prevent me from spending any type of double time on the first round draft picks for him. So I think that's sound advice there, Chris, with just giving up one player for each. You're probably going to end up with guys in that 5th round range. God, names are escaping me right now. I would love to see.
I've got it. I've got it for you here, Matt. Whiskey Stoned, if you want to go click on him, Whiskey Stoned was the team we had ranked 10th, who we thought could maybe make the playoffs, but probably was missing out just due to his quarterbacks. Okay. So if Whiskey Stoned decides to, sell off, can you give up both firsts and get Josh Jacobs and Christian Kirk? Who says no to that?
That's probably a pretty good deal. I think if I am, the Jacobs and Kirk owner, I think I want a little bit more. I think Jacobs should fetch more than a first, and I think Kirk is probably in the first range. But you're close. I think I add a second there. We're suddenly in business. I don't think it's far off.
Yeah, I mean that's what I'd be looking at, and I'm not sure Whiskey Stone wants to sell right immediately. But those are the kind of deals I'd be looking for if I need to, But I think those are the range of players, basically. To your point, that you're going to be looking at for those picks.
All right, Chris, let's get to the top two. We're down to really two teams left here. And our number two team is Bear Bond Down. Bear Bond Down at number two, which means we've got Whiskey Dicks, excuse the language, at number one. So first for Bear Bond, let's talk about Mahomes, Eckler, Chubb. Look at that. Chubb on a top two team. There's a shocker. Amon Ra, Keenan Allen, Jerry Judy, Travis Kelce, Isaiah Pacheco, Brandon Cooks, and Tua. Show me some depth here, man, to absolutely love this team. Because I love the starters. We've got Stafford on the bench, which I love. Love him as QB3 in all of our leagues this year, Chris. Geez, nothing on the bench. I wanted just a little bit of something. Jarvis Landry. Oh man, Cole Kmet. Taysom Hill, I'm sure he's going to score 30 more touchdowns this year. Picks are intact going forward. Looks like he's missing a second, but oh God, Chris, I wanted this team to be deep and I wanted to love this team. I really like the starting lineup. I think this team's going to score a ton of points, but we do have Brandon Cooks at that last flex spot. And then just not a whole lot of bench pieces. I love this team, Chris. I know I'm sounding kind of negative about it, but I love this team. I think it's going to score a ton of points, but boy, one little injury could really send this team in a spiral downhill.
Yeah, I mean the one guy you overlooked here is Damian Pierce on the bench for Houston. I think he's the one guy who could kind of play and be really productive for him. Give him four running backs to kind of anchor this lineup. I mean, listen, you've got the Mahomes Kelsey stack. That's going to keep you in every single game. You're going to be tough to beat every single week with that stack. It's just so productive. Eckler and Chubb are great. Amon Ra, Keenan Allen. Like you said, the starting lineup is great. We don't have really any depth, and that last flex spot, maybe last two flex spots, depending on how Pacheco is this year, could give him some pause, some cause for concern. He's got that QB3, which is huge. Again, I mean, this is yet another team here just missing that one little piece or possibly two pieces. And again, I'm going to be looking to buy with that 2024 first that I've got. I've got to look to buy here. I can't, I can't mess around when I've got Mahomes and Kelsey. When I've got Eckler, who is 28. I've got Nick Chubb, who's 27 years old. I've got aging pieces on this team, and I've got to strike now. So I'm going to be looking to buy with this team yet again. Another team that I'm going to use my first and try and buy and go for it.
Chris, what are you making of Brandon Cooks this year?
I don't know what to make of Cooks and Gallup in Dallas behind CeeDee Lamb. I know that's not really a take, but I just I want to think he'll be fine. I just don't know what role he's going to play. Dallas moves CeeDee Lamb around so much that I feel like it could take some looks away from Brandon Cooks. And Dak is so heavily targets CeeDee Lamb that I'm not sure how much is going to be left for Brandon Cooks to scoop up. But listen, I think you could do worse as your last starter. That's for sure. But again, not a guy. If I'm a title contender, he's not a guy I want to be relying on. I think he's more bye week depth more than anything.
Yeah, I think that's fair analysis right there. Although with this team situation, Chris, where I think we're pretty safe with a pretty high floor and a pretty high ceiling, I think Cooks is an interesting piece here on the back end that, let's say he hits a couple touchdowns, three for a buck 10 and two scores. I think that type of spike week could put you over the top. But if he throws up a two catches for 30 yards, no score, I don't think he kills this team here, Chris. I think it's going to be fine as it is. But I think your advice is perfect here, where we've got to sell off that first round pick here to add just a little bit more. We've already mentioned some names that we should be targeting with that first. I wish he had a second. I'd love to see him add a veteran wide receiver that's in that second round range to put there with, instead of Cooks to really solidify this thing. But let's spend the first. Let's not mess around. The news on Eckler just every single day, it seems to be worse and worse. Obviously think he's going to be fine this year, but what does the future hold? We talked about Nick Chubb, Keenan Allen, guys that are clearly aging. Travis Kelce, how much longer can he be dominant? So I think you're right, Chris, here. Let's sell that first. Let's get after it.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Chris, we have made it to our number one team, and we've got old Whiskey Dicks here at number one. I'm interested to see what he has here. I wonder if he's got some depth. We've got Joe Burrow, Christian McCaffrey, Travis Etienne, T. Higgins, Olave, Amari Cooper, George Kittle, Miles Sanders, Brandon Ayuk, and Kirk Cousins. So I would say, Chris, this is definitely the best starting lineup that we have seen. Oh boy, it is getting scary here with the lack of depth. Deontay Foreman, probably the best name available. Tyler Lockett as well. John Mechie. Geez, that's it. Robert Tanyan may be worth a mention. Picks intact going forward. So the best starting lineup here, Chris, which is what I'm sure put you over the top. We've got Burrow, we've got CMC, we've got Kirk Cousins. It's a very good team here, Chris. I think your rankings were spot on tonight.
Yeah, it's a really good team. This was the very first team I looked at when I opened up the league, and I was dying all the whole time when I was ranking to put somebody ahead of him just due to his lack of depth. But as you go through the league, everybody has a lack of depth, basically. And this is the very best starting lineup we've seen, which I just couldn't put anybody ahead of him. He does have Tyler Lockett on the bench, which I think is a strong play. He's got Raheem Mostert on the bench, Deontay Foreman. I mean, these are guys you hope hit this season. So he's not completely empty on the bench. With those three guys, I think they could be bye-week fill-ins for him. But I think with the Burrow Higgins stack and Christian McCaffrey and Travis Etienne, Kirk Cousins, Miles Sanders, George Kittle. I mean, there's not a hole in the starting lineup, which is, I think, honestly, the only team that can say he doesn't have a hole in the starting lineup. So, that's why he's one. I think he's a very worthy one. But as I said in the prior show, there's no runaway here. One injury to this team, and he's going to be struggling. Two injuries, I think, opens things up for everybody. So it's a good team. Again, I wouldn't do anything now, but again, another team whose picks are intact. Don't be afraid to go out and buy if you do suffer an injury.
Yeah, I think you said that perfectly, Chris. There's no reason to give up that 2024 first right now. In fact, I think November is probably the best time for you to be moving on from that 2024 first. Unless this team suffers catastrophic injuries, I think it's going to be there. Week 9, week 10, look at a, maybe a 2-loss situation, probably at worst, unless something really, really bad happens to it in terms of injuries. So I think we can afford to wait. I don't think there's any sort of urgency to make those moves right now. It's the most complete starting lineup that we've seen. That third place team, Chris, I think if he, moves on from those two firsts that he has, could show himself as a competitor with this team. But I really, really do like this team, Chris.
Yeah, and it's going to be an interesting dynamic the rest of the way. This offseason and during the season, who can make those moves to buy and jump up? Which one of the teams at the bottom decide to sell and kind of, impact the race to win the title? It's going to be really interesting because it is really tight. I mean, honestly, 1 through 12, and it's rare we say that 1 through 12 is pretty tight. All things considered.
Yeah, Chris, it's leagues like this that are the reason that we're in business, to kind of figure out what you really, really are and to get an outsider's perspective. Because with it being so tight, you might, kind of think that you're a competitor when you really are not. I think it's time to zig when everyone else is zagging in this league. Maybe start to acquire some picks. Just do something a little bit different to kind of set yourself out in some type of way to either be a competitor this year or 2 years down the road. I think that's kind of the way that we're going to go. So, Chris, let me give you the 1 through 12 one last time in this league. We got Whiskey Dicks, Bear Bun Down, Cold Beer here, Old Granddad, Ron Burgundy's Drink, Jim Beam Me Up, Scotchy at 6, 7 is Call Me Old Fashioned, Whiskey on the Brox at 8, Sailor Jerry at 9, Whiskey Stoned at 10, Third and Seagram's at 11, and Weller Oiled Machine at 12. So, Chris, that's going to do it for us tonight. We had an absolute blast looking at this Top Shelf Dynasty League. We wish you guys all the best of luck in this upcoming season. Please remember to like and subscribe, and we appreciate the business. Have a great night.